Good afternoon. I called today's press conference to share with residents of our great city some important information about our city's budget status. As everyone knows, the national recession and our severe state budget shortfall have created emergency fiscal conditions all across the state. On the one hand, because of a number of actions that we've taken over the past 6 years in the city of Providence, including the elimination of 445 positions, holding spending levels below the federal government, the state government, and the rate of inflation, and increasing non-property tax-based revenues, Providence is currently in better shape than some other urban communities. On the other hand, unless a number of additional structural reforms are implemented immediately, the crisis point for Providence would come in 4 to 6 months. Assuming the same level of revenue or less from the state in the next fiscal year, our finance department projects that the city government would become incapable of meeting its financial obligations in that amount of time. With that challenge before us, I have two important announcements to make today. First, I am very pleased to announce that the Laborers International Union of North America, Local 1033, the city's largest union, has come forward in partnership with the city and agreed to contract concessions and to enact significant structural reform. The men and women who plow the streets, clean our parks, and serve as clerks in the city offices have agreed to do their part so that the residents they serve have a government they can afford. And on behalf of all the residents of the city of Providence, I want to thank the business manager, Donald Ianozzi, who worked very hard to achieve this, and Vicky, Virgilio, who's president of 1033, and all the men and women of the local. I want to say thank you, Donald. The key provisions of this agreement are an increase in the co-payment for health insurance to 15% with a sliding scale for the lowest wage employees, an immediate wage freeze for all employees, significant reforms of the pension system, including increases in the retirement age and required years of service before an employee is entitled to pension benefits, a decrease in the allowance for disability pensions, and the elimination of a paid holiday. The members of 1033 have taken this step for one reason, because they believe that if the residents of Providence are sacrificing in these tough economic times, then they have an obligation to meet them halfway and sacrifice too. I want to thank them all again for that. In addition, I'm implementing a number of structural changes for all non-union employees, which they are accepting in the same spirit of sacrifice. Management employees will continue to take 2 unpaid furlough days, and in addition, there will be an increase in their health care co-share to 20% for employees who are paid in excess of $50,000 and 15% for those below that salary level. They will have the same pension changes that I've outlined in the agreement with 1033. There will be a wage freeze and also the elimination of a paid holiday. The agreement with 1033 has come about after several weeks of negotiations, and as you know, I have been involved in discussions over that same period of time with our other city unions. They are very aware of the stakes and the importance of what we're proposing today. And as I've said on previous occasions, and I'll repeat today, that unless we implement these kinds of structural changes and reforms in our contracts, the city of Providence will face a serious financial disaster. To be more specific, that would mean that every dollar in our reserves would be spent down, our bond rating would be downgraded severely, and we would be unable to meet payroll. In addition, such a disaster would force a drastic change ultimately in union contracts in the same way that bankruptcy forces major restructuring for corporations. And so the alternative is really clear. We can reform these contracts now in a way that is in the best long-term interests of residents and taxpayers and of our employees, or we can just watch city finances melt down, after which the contracts will have to be restructured by a court anyway. The terms that I've put forward to the other unions make significant changes, but they're fair. They also ensure that we don't cause one additional Rhode Islander to stand in the unemployment line. And the leaders of these unions that I met with as recently as today, I'm asking them again to come forward, to be part of this solution, and to do their part the way that the members of 1033 have agreed to do their part. But this is going to require action, and it's going to require action quickly. And finally, I will be transmitting an emergency supplemental budget to the Providence City Council tomorrow. That budget will reflect the structural changes and the reforms I've just articulated. This need for a supplemental budget and for these kinds of changes is precipitated by the state's mid-year action to reduce general revenue sharing, and that is the money that will return to cities and towns, and the failure at the state level to enact structural changes that would allow local governments to absorb these end-of-the-year budget cuts. The city projects a $17 million net operating deficit for the fiscal year that we're in. Approximately $11 million of that is made up of funds that the city had projected it would receive from the state of Rhode Island. And while the economic downturn has resulted in a revenue shortfall for the city, it has been mitigated by cost control measures taken earlier in the year. In fact, we expect that at the conclusion of this budget year, we will spend $5.5 million less than we had projected for the fiscal year. So this is really not an expenditure problem, it's really a revenue problem. But in order to close that gap, the following measures are necessary. Increases in health care co-pays up to the 20% for all city employees. Pension reform, including decreased COLAs, increases in the retirement age, and a decrease in the maximum disability allowance, also for all city employees. Elimination of vacation days that I've described. The elimination of 30 public safety positions. The expenditure of funds that are set aside for public safety severance. And in addition, some other minor measures that will provide some relief, and expenditures from the reserve fund will make up the balance. The details of my supplemental budget will be released tomorrow in a document that's submitted to the council. My finance team is here to answer your questions today. And with that, I will again thank the business manager and Vicky Virgilio and turn it over to Ianozzi.
Thank you, Mayor.